us as well. So the next presenter that I'm very excited about to seeing here gave me a fright because it's Angie Jones, and she's a Global Vice Director of Developer Relations at TBD. And when somebody like me who goes at the menu looks at like TBD, it says to be defined. It normally says like we don't know something. But the company name is TBD, which is actually a part of Block. It's a new business unit focused on decentralized technologies. So we're talking about decentralizing the web today. And Angie is an award-winning teacher and international keynote speaker. She's known for innovative out-of-the-box thinking style and has resulted in more than 25 patented inventions. So she's got inventions in the world of metaverses, collaboration software, social networking, smarter planet solutions, and software development. The other thing is that she's a delight to work with, and it's absolutely gorgeous to meet her. So, you know, you meet people and you talk to them for a bit and you see like there's brightness coming, there's really clever ideas, but also warmth. And that is just wonderful to see when you get people, more of those in our tech world that can be human and actually be exciting to talk to. So Angie is going to talk about refactoring the web, which is, as she described it here, the web democratized how we connect with each other and how we exchange information. I remember before the web, I used BBSs, I also used email lists, and then out of a sudden I realized like I don't have to call a telephone number to connect with another computer. I have all the information in the world immediately on my keyboard. And if I want to change something, I can contact the people behind. And when wikis came around or Wikipedia came around, I realized it's a read-write web. I could do anything and contribute back to it. But we kind of lost one thing, and that was the identity layer. Like your identity has never been defined on the web. Yes, you have a domain name, and you can use it as a validation. There's all kind of open ID tests that we had in the past. But in essence, a lot of times we try to get an identity, we use a third-party provider. We log in with Microsoft, we log in with Google, we log in with Twitter, we log in with Facebook, and oftentimes we give a lot of information away that we don't want to give away that way. And also now that some APIs are being shut down or changed from underneath us, out of a sudden it's not as useful anymore to say log in with Twitter because people left it or the API doesn't work, and then you have no people any longer. So Angie is working on a product called Web5, and that's an open source decentralized web platform to return ownership and control over data on the which where it belongs. So how you can have an API to manage identity without actually giving it to a third party or actually having to use an API that you can't control. So I'm really excited to hear about that. So I hope Angie is ready. So please come up on stage and woo us with what you want to talk about. Let's refactor.
All right. Hello, everyone. I want you to meet Alice. Alice is pretty tech savvy, and she's what the kids call extremely online. She has accounts on every platform that you can think of, from social media apps to online shopping websites, and she uses her trusty email as a universal identifier across the web. Unfortunately, one day Alice loses access to her email. A simple mistake leaves Alice locked out of her accounts. You see, her two-factor authentication and the app verifications are tied to this address. Every app, every service that forms her online identity is suddenly out of her reach. Her photos are trapped in one app, her playlist in another, her personal writings in yet another. And despite being the rightful owner, Alice is unable to retrieve her content without access to that email. This unfortunate incident is a wake-up call, not just to Alice, but to all of us. It highlights the vulnerabilities of the web and our inability to truly own our identities and control our data. But I thought that the web was always meant to be decentralized, right? Indeed, it was. However, it is missing a key element. Doesn't look like my clicker is working, so I might have to stay here. It's missing the identity layer. So applications that require user accounts, they have to collect our information in order to store it with our content. And major powerhouses such as Facebook and Google have tried to help alleviate a lot of this by enabling us to authenticate to these third-party apps via their services. And while this is super convenient, we have very little agency over our information. What if we could own and control both our identity and our data across the web? This is possible with Web 5. So Web 5, thank you, embraces the convenience of the account model that we know from Web 2, and it restores control back to the users and ethos of Web 3. The harmony of these two views is what we're calling Web 5. This platform enables developers to build a centralized application while abstracting away the complexity of doing so. So Web 5 is comprised of three core pillars, all of which are based on open standards. We have decentralized identifiers, also known as DIDs or DIDs. We have verifiable credentials, and then we also have decentralized web nodes. And I want to walk you through each one of these. So the identifiers that we know and use today are owned by some intermediary, whether that be the government or a company, an organization. For example, my email address is an identifier that's associated with me. Much like Alice, I use this identifier all over the web to authenticate and identify myself. However, I don't own that email address. My Twitter handle, TechGirl1908, near and dear to my heart. This is an identifier that's associated with me, but I don't own it. And that was proven just yesterday as Twitter rebranded to X. There was a user who already had the X handle. He had about 25,000, 26,000 followers. And guess what? Twitter said, "It's mine now, buddy," and confiscated it. And so he lost his handle. Who knows what sort of branding he had done with that, but it was never his to begin with. So before we can realize truly decentralized applications, we first need decentralized identifiers that users own and control. Now, decentralized identifiers are a W3C standard. They're basically a long string of text that's comprised of three parts. The first part is the scheme, that's always going to be DID. The second part is the DID method. So this ultimately resolves to some sort of CRUD operation that's available for this DID method. So this could be create, read, update, delete. And then we have the GUID that identifies the DID subject. When I say DID subject, I mean the person, the place, or the thing that is being identified. Now, decentralized identifiers are the only part of Web 5 that is stored on a blockchain. Not any of your information. We happen to think that it's pretty wild to store people's information on a blockchain, so we don't. It's just that string, and it could be any blockchain you want or no blockchain, actually. So this example, the first one is a decentralized identifier that's anchored on Bitcoin. The second one is anchored on Ethereum, and that last one is anchored on the web. So that does not use a blockchain at all. Uh-oh. All right. So decentralized identifiers essentially work as a URI. Remember, that string is what's on the blockchain, but everything else is off, so it needs to point to some data. So you can think of it as a key-value pair where your DID is the key, and then your DID document is the value. That DID document is stored in some decentralized storage systems such as IPFS, And the DID document is just a JSON file, and it describes how to interact with the DID subject. So it contains things like the DID subject's public keys, as well as authentication and verification methods. The second pillar of Web 5 is verifiable credentials. So verifiable credentials are also a W3C standard. They work hand in hand with decentralized identifiers to enable trustless interactions. What this means is two parties don't need to know each other or trust each other in order to engage. Let me show you an example. So let's say that Alice wants to apply for a loan, and the lender needs to verify a proof of income, okay? Well, Alice's employer, Acme, can issue a verifiable credential, which Alice would then store in her identity wallet. And I want to click into that credential so that you see what's there. Notice here we have the issuer as Acme, we have the subject as Alice. More specifically, we have the DIDs for both that company and the person. And then we have the claims that the issuer is making about the subject. So Acme is saying, hey, this DID subject, her real name is Alice Smith, and her salary is $120,000. This is all that the lender needs in order to continue with their process, so that's all the information that's disclosed. Acme will sign this cryptographically, and it's stored in Alice's wallet. Now, when the lender asks Alice for a proof of income, she can present them with this verifiable credential. She also cryptographically signs this. Now remember, the lender doesn't know Alice, doesn't trust Alice, but that's okay because it does consider Acme a trustworthy entity. Acme has essentially vouched for Alice, making these claims about her, and therefore trust is extended. The final pillar of Web 5 is decentralized web nodes. So today, centralized entities act as our data stores. They host our content and our preferences in their applications, on their servers, right? Decentralized web nodes changes this by enabling us to decouple our data from the applications that we use, and instead we can host it in our own personal data stores. So Blue Sky is a good example. This is, for all intents and purposes, a decentralized version of Twitter in the works. But instead of hosting your posts and your connections with that application, you host it with you. And what this means is that for any other decentralized application that understands the protocol underneath, then you can use all of your data and your content, your connections on those apps as well. So if there's a decentralized Instagram, a decentralized TikTok, you can bring your data with you. Now, decentralized web nodes can host both public and private data, okay? So in the case of something like Blue Sky, you would want things like your connections and your posts to be public. Things like your DMs, you would want to be private, right? So again, decentralized web nodes are also not hosted on a blockchain because, trust me, you do not want your tweets and your DMs on a public immutable ledger. So instead, you host this locally. You can replicate it across your devices and your clouds. All of that data syncs up, okay? Now, this definitely provides a fundamental shift in the way that we exchange information, but it's not a total overhaul of the web that we already know. In fact, your decentralized web app will work pretty much like a progressive web app, except with the use of the Web 5 SDK. Your app is free to truly go serverless because you don't have to be liable for hosting users' data. Now, remember that DID document I told you about? This is what links your decentralized identifier to your web nodes. So in that document, this segment here is given the URIs for a decentralized web node. So if I were to come to your app with my decentralized identifier, this is how I'm logging in now. No more username, no more password. Given that, you can resolve that decentralized identifier, find the DID document, and boom, now you have the URIs to my personal data stores where you can read and write data to. Now, if you wanted to request information from my personal data store, you could send an HTTP request. This is under the covers. Web 5 makes this really clean. I'll show it to you. But under the covers, what you're doing is making a request. And this request is saying, give me all of the records from Alice's decentralized web node that follow the social media posting schema. So that's how the data is interoperable between applications. Those applications need to follow the same schemas. Schema.org is brilliant for this. There's so many different schemas there available for just about any type of data construct. So you send this request, you say, give me the social media posting objects, and then what will be returned is all of those objects from that web node that are public and follow that schema. If the data is private, that application would need explicit permission in order to get that data. All right? So of course, all of this is pretty complicated, especially for non-technical users. We're also working on an identity wallet to help people manage this. As I often remind builders in the space, decentralization alone is not a feature that most of your users are asking for. They don't want to hear about it, they don't care, all right? So this needs to be an implementation detail. Given this wallet, someone can manage their identifiers, their web nodes, who has access to the data, present their verifiable credentials, etc. Now, Web 5 enables developers to build decentralized web applications. Web 5 is comprised of those three pillars. All of those pillars are open standards, remember? So no company owns those standards. What we're doing at TBD is implementing those standards, aggregating them together to make this Web 5 library. Now, given this, it's open source, you're free to focus on what you care about. You don't have to think about how to decentralize your app. You just use the Web 5 library. Your app is decentralized, and you can focus your attention on what you care about, which is your app, right? So the sky is the limit to what you can build. I do have a couple of examples here just to give you some ideas. So let's say that Alice uses Spotify as her streaming service. But she's heard some great things about Tidal and how they pay their artists more money on the streams. So she wants to give it a try. But just the thought of like signing up to a new app, creating my playlist over again, it's just too much. It's enough to keep me locked in somewhere, right? So with Web 5, instead of Spotify writing to their server, they would write to Alice's web node. So we see here the schema that they're using is the music playlist, okay? So if Alice wanted to try Tidal or any other service out, she can give them access to her web node. She can even say only read access, and they'll be able to query for all of the objects that match the music playlist schema. And now they know what she likes. Her playlists are readily available in both apps, and she can use them freely. Medical records, owning those is something that I personally care about. So I have moved states 3 times in the last 5 years. Every time I move, I have to get a new set of doctors, right? Anybody had to get a new doctor, you know how much of a pain that is. You're asking this doctor to fax information over to this other doctor. And maybe if it was only one doctor, that's okay, but we have specialists, right? I have a gynecologist, I have a dentist, I have a dermatologist, right? So in this case, Alice's primary care physician can write her records to her decentralized web node using the patient schema. And then when Alice gets a new specialist or a new doctor, she can give them access to those records as well. No longer have to rely on third parties to exchange information on your behalf. All right, so Web 5.js has been released. It is in a tech preview. Everybody say tech preview. Say tech preview. We're going to keep doing it. Say tech preview. All right. What that means is that it's not quite ready for production apps. That's why I wanted you to say it out your mouth, because I don't want you to put your app on the App Store and then you're calling me with complaints, okay? It's not ready for that, But it is ready to play with. You can definitely check it out. And I want to show it to you now. What it does is going to bring decentralized identity and data storage to your applications, okay? So let's go ahead and I'll show you the library. So it's a NPM package. So we can go ahead and import Web 5. We're going to do that from our TBD. Yes, this long string here. All right. And then the very first thing we'll do is we'll say web5.connect. What this is going to do is it's going to look to see if this user already has a decentralized identifier and or a decentralized web node established on their local device that they are engaging with the app with, okay? If it's already there, boom, they're in business and they can start reading and writing to their web node. If it's not there, Web 5 is going to create that for them, okay? Now, Web 5 will anchor your DID on the ION, using the ION method, right? However, like I said, you can use any decentralized identifier you want. So if you wanted to use something else, an ETH one or a web one or whatever, you can just do that. That's totally fine. And what this is going to do is it's going to return both an instance of Web 5 as well as the decentralized identifier for the user. So we'll call this user DID. All right? Is that big enough? Can you all see? All right, cool. Now, okay, good. Now, given this identifier, remember, you can resolve an identifier to get the decentralized, the DID document. And that DID document is where all of the other remote decentralized web nodes are. So that's how it knows where to like sync and replicate your data to. Now let's say you want to create a new object in the decentralized web node. These objects are called a record. So we're going to say, let's create a record. And we'll say this is record. And we'll say web5.dwn.records.create. Now, inside of here, you want to give it a payload. And you can specify that with this data field. So this property can be text. It could be JSON. It could be a stream. It could be a blob. It could be whatever you want that to be. So we'll just make ours text and say, hello, we are developers. All right? And then you're going to specify a message object. And inside of there, you can indicate multiple properties. So one is like maybe the data format. So I can say, all right, this is plain text. And then I can also specify the schema. So remember, querying by schemas is a pretty solid way to get the data that you're looking for. So it's a good idea to indicate this, even though it is optional. So I can say https schema.org. We'll just say text, okay? And then, by default, this record is going to be private in your decentralized web node, meaning other applications can't just read it or get it, right? So if I wanted this to be public so that, anyone can see it, then I would specify published and say that this is true. And voila, we've just created an object in our user's decentralized web node. Nice and clean here, all right? So let's say I want to get some records. You're showing up to my application. I want to see if you already have some data that I can utilize to make a really good experience for you. So we're going to say, go ahead and query some records. And we'll say web5.dwn records.query. And inside of this query, you're going to specify a message, right? And then inside of that message, you want to filter. So how do you want to filter this data? I can say, well, I want to find everything that has this schema. And now I would get all of the records back that have that schema. Okay? I can also sort these records or do whatever I need to do there. All right? Next, I want to maybe read a record. To do that, we could use this record that we created or one of the records that we got back. Let's just go with the first record that we got back. So we would say records, give me the first one, dot, and then I can say give me the data. And then notice here I have blob, I have JSON, I have stream, I have text. I know that it's a text, so I want to get that. And then do whatever you want with that, right? Maybe I want to just print it to the log or something like that. Okay? Very simple, really easy to use. And then what about updating a record? We'll say await record, get the first one, dot update. Dead simple. And here we specify like what it is we want to update. So maybe I want to change that to hello again. We are developers. If it was JSON and I just wanted to change like a simple property on there, I could do that as well. All right? And then I'm just showing you the CRUD operations. Finally, if I want to delete a record, we'll say, give me that record, dot what? Who can guess? Huh? I thought y'all were engineers. Delete. Okay, all right. And then we'll go ahead and delete that record. So very, very simple to use. Notice I didn't have to think much about decentralization. I didn't have to think about where the data is stored. All of that is done under the covers in this library, okay? Again, it is in a tech preview. You are welcome to use it to play around with, but don't put anything in the App Store just yet, okay? Now, given this, you can build whatever you think of once we have the web the way that it was always intended to be, which is decentralized, right? It is open to build. Everything we're doing is open source, so we welcome you to come into our community and help in any way that you want to, or just play around, give feedback, share your ideas, or whatever. Our website is developer.tbd.website. You can find us there. And I will also be giving a workshop tomorrow at 9 a.m. on Web 5 if you want to actually build an app with me, okay? Thank you all so much for your time.
Hey. Hello, hello. Sorry
Hello,
about that.
Chris.
Cool. You were fast. So, we have lots of questions.
Really?
Yeah, that's a great thing. So, let's go in the middle so
Okay.
there's more light. The first question was, what happened to Web 4?
I knew that would be a question. What happened to Web 4? I really need like a catchy phrase, a comeback for that, because I get asked that like on a daily basis, and I don't have a punny answer. I need one. So if anybody has a cute little answer for me, tell me after this. But the truth of the matter is that it's an integration between Web 2. We saw so much discourse, Web 2 versus Web 3. It doesn't have to be all of that drama, you know? How about we take the great things about Web 2, Chris, the principles that we like about it, right? It's not a bad web. And then we take some of the things from Web 3 that we like, and we combine those together to make a responsible web that's decentralized.
Or you can release WebNT that nobody wants. Okay. What are the main differences between Web 5 and the Solid protocol?
Yeah. So Web 5 and Solid. Solid is the project by Tim Berners-Lee. Basically the same ethos. We want to decentralize the web. We want to give users control over their data. We're just using a different tech stack to do that. So ours is based on open web standards, two of them by W3C, the other one by the Decentralized Identity Foundation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one question also was about the DID. Where can I get my DID was the main question.
Where can you get your DID? So when I did that web5.connect, boom, you now have a decentralized identifier. I could have printed that DID out, and you would have your nice long string that you can utilize, right? You can resolve that string, you can anchor it where you want or whatever.
And what ensures the security of the did.json? What if it's lost for whatever reason?
Your did document.
Yeah.
So the did document is on a decentralized storage system, right? And that stuff can also be synced. You don't have to manage that yourself unless, you really wanted to. But you can sync all of this stuff across your different devices and cloud providers if you even wanted them. I always say decentralization is a spectrum. Some people want to be super decentralized. Some people are like, I prefer convenience, and that's totally okay.
Which just brings me to the next one. What's the incentive for commercial enterprises to implement Web 5?
Yeah, you would be surprised. A lot of people think that big tech would be against something like this, but we're seeing right before our very eyes that they're embracing it. You see that Meta just released Threads app and has committed to become a part of the Fediverse, meaning, yeah, we want you to be able to take your data. The upside for them is they don't have that cold start problem. So when new users come to their app, notice when Threads was released, in 4 days, they were up to 100 million users.
I wouldn't know, I'm in Europe.
Oh. They're up to 100 million users, and a big part of that is because you were able to bring your following from Instagram over with you. So you didn't have to start not knowing anyone and trying to find your friends.
But isn't that the problem? I mean, you brought not users, but you brought logins from Instagram. There's no interaction.
That's right. That's why you need Web 5.
So that number means actually, it always fascinates me when there's a new system coming out. We got 150 million users in 2 days. You got 150 million logins that did no interaction. That's not a user yet.
Right.
You don't even know what that person is doing or what it's good for.
Yeah, fair enough.
Since Spotify is the current market leader, why would they ever implement a feature like that which benefits their competitors more than it does them?
Yeah. This is what I think, and this is speculation. I think that you might get a little resistance from maybe the top 2 players at first, right? But everybody else would love to implement something like this. So then you have that use case where you tell users, oh, bring your data here. We're good. And I now start using all of these other apps, and then guess what? Those other folks look like the bad guy. Why would I want to use your app when you're locking my data inside of it, and I can never take it with me? So then they're almost forced to adopt this model.
Well, we tried that with OpenID and OAuth before. I remember when, okay, now I'm aging myself here. When MySpace was the first one to get a completely open ID system that you can take with you, and then nobody used them anymore and it became irrelevant. But it's, I mean, the convenience moment, what you said, is I think the biggest problem there. I mean, when Twitter went weird, I tried Mastodon, and I tried to explain Mastodon to so many people right now. It's not that easy. One of the things you did in your description is that the decentralization becomes easier with you. Where do you see that main difference? How is it easier to explain Web 5 than to explain Mastodon or any other things that are decentralized?
Right. You don't have to really think about it. That's the good part. So that's what I mean about embracing the convenience of Web 2. You can't leave that behind for something that's cumbersome and expect adoption. Right? We also see that sometimes things are ahead of its time, and then it cycles back, and now the world is ready for it. We've seen this with AI. People think AI is new. We all know this is nothing new. People have been working on this for decades, but now it's accessible. Now I can easily put this in my application. That's all you need, and now it's taken off.
Well, in the AI case, it's all locked-in systems that you have to use for a third party and pay them for it. So there's
we're working on it, Chris.
But that's a different story. Yeah, okay. Well, thank you very much. That's all we have time for.
Okay.
There's a lot of questions left over, so you might actually look into the app yourself.
Yeah, I'll be around too. If anyone has additional questions, find me. I'll be here for the rest of the conference. I'll also be at TBD booth. We have a booth, and I'll do some office hours there. Jingle, what time is my office hours? 4 o'clock? 4 o'clock tomorrow, I'll be at the TBD booth if anybody want to come chop it up, say hi, get a selfie, or talk about Web 5. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, Chris.
Bye-bye. All right. right, we're plowing through them here. I was a bit late coming on stage because I was actually meeting the next speaker down behind the stage, and he just got mic'd up, and I got mic'd up, and it was all really weird. How are you feeling so far? How is it working out for you? Are we good? Who's looked at the expo so far? I don't even know where it is. Cool. Did you have food? Because I didn't. And who found somebody who they talked to that they never talked to before, but they want to talk more to? I want all hands up when I say that. This is something that we really should do more. So find somebody that excites you in a professional fashion and talk to those people and share your information. Because there's great stuff happening, and it's all about decentralizing here. So let's centralize it in this room and then decentralize the information later on as well. So we got some time, so I'm going to be talking a bit more about what's happening here and what we can do. If you haven't looked at the program yet, the crawl later on, going through all the expo booths, is a good idea to take that time to find the information there. There's coffee still in the place. Our partners having good coffee, not the one that we have back here. And you can actually contact people over the app. Use the app to communicate with each other. As a web guy, I hate saying that, but it's actually really useful to get this information because you can then contact people later on. And this is 10,000 people here, so you can either spend 3 weeks on LinkedIn trying to find as many connections, or you can actually use the app here to ask some questions and get information from people here. I love how some people are super branded. There's the people from Red Hat with a red hat on, so that's quite interesting. That's pretty obvious. I could be that, but that's a different story. Okay, so let's get started with introducing the next speaker. Pause it. Okay, I'm hearing that I should pause more because we still have to set people up here. Okay, so who took part in the Code 100 competition or followed that one? So this is the exciting bit tonight, where we're going to do the final of that one. We had a round yesterday where we had 100 people taking part in the coding competition. This whittled down to a smaller number now. And after this main event, there's going to be a huge thing on stage here that's almost like a game show, where you're going to see developers compete with each other in live coding and answering questions. And at the end of that, we will have one winner that goes away with a lot of money that is not coming from my bank account, which is good. But it's also interesting to see that, because I just applied for a lot of jobs when I lost my last job. And oh my God, coding exercises and interviews are the worst thing ever, because they're either